Welcome to Mediocre Gaming, and today we're playing Destiny 2. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and salutations! Today, everything you wanted to know about Season of the Drifter, and some things you didn't. Let's get to it. Season of the Drifter, Joker's Wild, whatever you want to call it, has been out almost 1 week, and we already know basically everything that's coming for the next 3 months. So you've already seen Gambit Prime and The Reckoning, Tier 1, and probably Tier 2. Tier 3, which is the final tier, is coming March 15th. Thorn Quest is coming on March 12th. And we'll have the Allegiance Quest, which is tied to the Thorn Quest, in which you choose either the Drifter side or the Vanguard side. Does that make a difference in the end, or does it only make a difference in the storytelling? We actually don't know yet, and we won't know until Tuesday. Additionally, we're going to have new maps popping up. Starting March 12th, we're going to have Deep 6 show up in Gambit Prime. Of course, March 15th, we have Tier 3 in the Reckoning, Invitations of the Nine. March 19th, we're going to have Legion's Folly, new map for Gambit Prime. March 26th, Emerald Coast for Gambit Prime. April 2nd, we'll have all of the maps available. Plus, we'll have private matches available for Gambit Prime. April 9th, we'll have Arc Week, which is free to all players. Most likely having to revolve around Arc abilities, Arc subclasses, and Arc weapons, starting April 16th and going until May 6th. So about 3 weeks, we're going to have the Revelry, which is free to all players, which is a event like the Dawning, like Crimson Days, like any of those others, where you're going to do a lot of grinding to get the rewards that are tied to that event. Now, we also know, looking from the Forsaken roadmap, that Joker's Wild Season of the Drifter is going to have 2 exotic quests. One we already know, we have the Thorn, and then we have one other one, probably within 2 or 3 weeks of the end of the Season of the Drifter. But that is basically everything for the Season of the Drifter. And I do have to say that they have created a satisfying game loop between Gambit Prime and The Reckoning. You go into Gambit Prime, you can play for hours and hours playing Gambit Prime, take those synths, turn it into a moat, go over to the Reckoning, turn it into gear, go back into Gambit Prime, and use that gear and get more synths. Now, having played less than a week, the cracks have already started to show in this season. Now, what do I mean by that? You play Gambit Prime. It's basically a separate version, a one-round version of Gambit. The Primeval phase is less raid-like and more Last Word-like, I would say. It is more of a slog where you go and you take out the envoys, you get a buff. Every time you get that buff, they add 1 to that Primeval Slayer. So you go from Primeval Slayer to ×2, ×3, however many it takes until you take it down, or the other team takes theirs down. So the goal when you get to the Primeval is not so much damage the Primeval, but to kill the envoys as quickly as possible, get that buff out, wait for it to disappear, and kill the envoys again. And why do I say that? Because invaders can come in, and if they take even one person out, you're gonna lose any damage that you do on the Primeval. As the buff gets bigger, it gets a little bit harder to bring it back up to full health. And once you get up to 4+, you can generally take down the entire health bar if you just blast away at it. So that's a problem. The Reckoning. There really isn't a big push to go into the Reckoning, either Tier 1 or Tier 2. Why do I say that? Because Tier 1 is going to get you the Tier 1 armor. All the Tier 1 armor has +1 stats on it. Now, when you look at the bonuses for each version of the armor, so the Reaper, the Collector, the Sentry, and the Invader, the first perk unlocks at +3, and then +6, +10, and +15. So in order to get one perk, you're going to have at least 3 Tier 1 pieces on, and there's no way of getting that second perk. So why would you want Tier 1 armor? You do not. Tier 2 armor gives you +2. So if you have all 5 pieces, that'll give you +10. Much more worth it than the Tier 1. You can get 3 out of the 4 perks. Of course, the final perk is the best one or the most sought after one, so even the tier 2 armor, not that desirable. So we are all waiting for the tier 3 armor, which doesn't come out until March 12th, and it has a power requirement of 690. So you need to be minimally 680 to even attempt it, and you're going to want to be close to 690 in order to complete it. And that is knowing where you need to be and when and what subclass to use and what weapons work better, much like the tier 2. If you're playing tier 2 at 660, you're going to be having an uphill battle. It'll be much, much more difficult to complete the tier 2 at 660 than if you're at 670 or above. Same thing with tier 3. Although you can go in at 680, it's going to be much more difficult unless you're 690 or above. And I've already run into where people that are at 670 or close to 670, they're 667, they won't play with anyone that is a lower power level than 665. So if you're randomly matchmaking and there is a group of 2 or 3 and they see you at 660, they're going to leave. So there's not a whole lot of reasons to go into the Reckoning other than you have to. So initially, after you play your first Gambit Prime match, you can go into the Reckoning and complete that quest step. He'll give you the converter that you can take the synths and make motes, and then you can make those wages in the Reckoning and get the pieces of armor. Now, when you get these special bounties from the Drifter, he basically has 3 different sets of bounties. You have daily bounties that you can do anywhere or doing certain activities. You have certain bounties that you go into Gambit Prime, and then weekly bounties that will give you an upgrade to your synthesizer. Synthesizer will then upgrade from tier 1 to tier 2, and then presumably we'll be able to go from tier 2 to tier 3. Now, in order to complete the quest steps, you'll have to play some Gambit Prime, and you will have to complete 4 Reckonings at the maximum tier level that you're capable of doing. So when you start off, you go through Gambit Prime once, you go to Reckoning once, you get that synthesizer, it's weak. You have to complete 4 tier 1 matches, so 5 in total, and then you get that upgrade. And then you get to tier 2. Likewise, more than likely, we haven't seen it yet, but more than likely you're going to have to do another 4 rounds, complete 4 rounds of the tier 2 in order to get the upgrade for tier 3. And then after that, we don't know. Will you continue to need to complete tier 3s in order to get those, basically a guaranteed piece of tier 3 armor? More than likely. So playing the Reckoning in the beginning, not so much worthwhile, especially at tier 1. Tier 2, you can get the pieces if you want, but you don't want to spend a whole lot of time or energy on them, or infusions for that matter, because you know that you're going to go for that tier 3, that notorious armor. But once you get the tier 3 armor, then what? I mean, it's basically that you're done with the season other than the exotic quest. Go and get your Thorn, go get your other exotic weapon. There's a couple new exotic armor pieces that randomly drop. Get those, and then what? If you really enjoy Gambit, if you really enjoy Gambit Prime, then you can put those armor sets to good use by going into Gambit Prime and using them. If you're not really big on Gambit, then why are you doing any of this anyway, other than to further the lore? Yes, you can go into the Reckoning, you can go pick up those gold eggs here and there, 9 of them to complete that lore book, but that's above and beyond. So there's not a whole lot else to expect from the Season of the Drifter. Now there are going to be some Zerb bounties, which I assume is tied to the Invitation of the 9. But you've got to figure out what to do with those extra 20 pieces of armor that are only good in Gambit Prime. If you are like some, your vault space is very limited because you're keeping maybe 1 copy of pieces of armor or weapons that may or may not be any good, and with changes coming on a more or less irregular basis, the guns that you are currently using may not be as relevant in the future, and the guns that are worthless right now, maybe they're going to be worth something down the line, so you don't want to get rid of them. As a result, your vault space is very limited, and you have to figure out what to do with those extra pieces of armor when you're not using them. You say, oh, I kind of feel like putting on my collector suit. So you go to the vault, you pick out your collector suit, you go into Gambit Prime. Once you're done with Gambit Prime, then you gotta go and vault the armor again. So you need an extra 20 spaces or 60 spaces if you're playing 3 different characters, Warlock, Titan, and Hunter, and getting full sets of each type. Now, if you're only getting the Invader set, or you're only getting the Sentry set, or Reaper set, or what have you, then it's not as big of a deal, but it's still extra space that you have to figure something out with. Now, at the end of the day, I am glad that Bungie is creating these more satisfying gameplay loops that are more than just grind, but I wanted to see a little bit more. More what? I don't really know. It just doesn't seem like there is a lot of meat to the content that is being put out. Yes, there is a new game mode. It's Gambit Prime, but it is based off of Gambit. It is essentially Gambit with new maps. So if you have new maps, let's say 4 or 5 new maps, over the course of 3 months, you're eventually going to learn all the nooks and crannies of each map, and you're going to know where people pop up, when, and there are already cases of that happening. And as with any competitive PvP aspect game, you are going to have people that are motivated to do whatever it takes in order to win. People have seen back in Destiny 1 things like the lag switchers and whatnot, and I am certain that people will look for loopholes today. But that is it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to ring the bell before you leave to be notified of all future episodes as soon as they go live. And thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. And we'll see you next time.